Once in a great while, a show will come along that will be remembered by an entire generation. Its story and characters will have made their mark on thousands, if not millions of people, and will continue to inspire them long after its final episode has aired. Miraculous Tales of Ladybug and Cat Noir had the potential to be such a show. With it blending together superheroes and magical girls, it did create a fun show in the beginning. But here we are 5 seasons later, and somehow this show has gone from being a cartoon with some of the biggest potential to being the absolute worst. This show is trash. While it was strong in the beginning, this show has slowly gotten progressively worse and worse as the seasons have gone on. From inconsistent writing, to neglected character arcs, and disappointing finales, Miraculous has ultimately become a heaping pile of garbage. But I understand if you're skeptical. So, I'm going to take you through the story of Miraculous and explain to you, with as much detail as I possibly can, on why this show wasted its potential. This is the story about how Miraculous, Tales of Ladybug and Cat Noir, failed its fan base. But before I talk about the many ways the show screwed itself over so hard, I'd like to talk about the good stuff. The things that caught my attention initially, at least before anybody thinks that I'm just some jaded YouTuber who came along to ruin their hopes and dreams. Let me talk about how I first got into the show. Roughly 7.5 years ago, my god, has it been that long already? Anyways, 7 years ago, one of Rebel Taxi's videos showed up in my subscription feed. In it, he would cover Miraculous. And, at the time, nothing about the animation stood out to me. I wasn't, and still am, not the biggest fan of CGI. However, there was something that did catch my attention. The voice acting.
But I had it covered.
Huh? No time for your childish charm, Cat Noir.
No way. That's Christina V and Bryce Papenbrook. As an anime fan who watched a lot of it in English, this immediately piqued my interest, to say the least. Which is something a lot of fans forget about when praising the show. It has a really good cast. Well, at least in English. Some cartoons, when they're trying to get off the ground, can't really afford top talent. Well, unless you're Disney. Which is funny, because Disney would eventually obtain the streaming rights to Miraculous. Having the voices of Ray Hino and Aaron Yeager living as high school students, while being superheroes on the side, and fighting against Hisoka, makes me enjoy the show far more than I should. And so, with all of Season 1 being released at the time, I started to watch Miraculous. And to the show's credit, I think its first episode is really well done. Stormy Weather is the pilot episode of Miraculous, and boy are they putting their best foot forward, at least by comparison to the rest of the season, which somehow doesn't look as good as this particular episode. Some of these shots are really well done, and to be honest I haven't seen anything as good since then. Although, between you and me, I suspect the movie will look 10 times better, obviously. With our duo dodging falling cars, and Marinette blocking this bus with her yo-yo are big standout moments for me. Not to mention this sweeping shot of Cat Noir using his cataclysm to destroy these support beams. Although, I don't have much to say about the dialogue. It's fun and campy, but nothing really stands out. It's only when we move past the pilot that Miraculous starts to expand its cast as well as its story. Well, if only a little, as far as the latter's concerned. While there isn't too much story to speak of, we are still introduced to a decent-sized cast of characters throughout the first season's run. Within the first couple episodes, we are introduced to the best friends of our two leads, Alia and Nino. The way these two act, though, they feel more like extroverted extensions of our two main characters. Next up on the chopping block is Chloe. See what I did there? Chopping block? Oh, we'll talk about Chloe later. She's basically a bully and a secondary antagonist to our main cast of characters, alongside being childhood friends with Adrian. And yet somehow most of Chloe's behavior somehow goes unnoticed by our secondary lead. And in the episodes that follow, we are introduced to characters like Alex, Kim, Max, Julika, and Rose. Now, granted, these are not absolute standouts, but they do the job well enough. How Miraculous is able to explore its characters is through Monster of the Week storytelling. The man accountable for these monsters is Hakamoth, the main villain who sends out Akuma to corrupt the minds of people of Paris, turning them into monsters. As Cat Noir and Ladybug fight to save the civilians, the story slowly develops the two main leads as well as the supporting cast of characters. And finally, halfway through the season, we receive an origin story for Marinette, and Adrian's superhero lives. And interestingly enough, I've seen criticism lobbied at this origin story, specifically at the fact that the origin is in the middle of the first season and not when the series started. And I do understand this. However, I don't think it holds that much water. Plenty of shows, especially superhero ones, tend to start with the status quo. Take 2003's Teen Titans, for example. When we were first introduced to the series, we were introduced to our heroes as they are, and not how they got there. And it's not until the final season where we got a proper origin story of our team of teens. All I'm saying is that the origin story doesn't need to be right off the bat. Sometimes, all you need is a good hook, and the origin can come later. And then along comes season 2, and it completely ups the ante. We get more lore, kind of, and we get new superheroes, alongside a pretty good finale, with a new villain, kind of. For a lot of people, this is peak Miraculous, and it's not hard to see why. I still have a lot of problems with it, which I'll get to in a little bit, but overall I think the first 2 seasons were really good. And I especially love the part where we find out that Natalie, she knew the whole time. So now, she's Hawkmoth's brand new partner in crime. A new villain on the block. Whoa, wait. I thought you said the show was trash. Weren't you supposed to be talking about how terrible it is? Yeah, and I just wanted to talk about the good times, but now we're done. Now I get to talk about how this show screwed itself over so hard that it won't be able to walk for weeks, metaphorically speaking. But we have to start somewhere. A lot of people will say that the real problems of Miraculous started in season 3, and I hate to break it to those people, to all of you. The problems started in the beginning, in season 1. While our main cast of characters has pretty decent designs, okay, so they do come across as a bit lazy, they'd still come out looking okay, at least. I cannot say the same, however, for almost every other character. Stormy Weather looks pretty good. Alright, let's see, who's our next bad guy we have to fight? Oh boy, I can't wait to see what the next guy looks like. Oh no. What the hell did they do to my boy Nino? Okay, this is probably just a one-time thing, oh my god! For every Lady Wi-Fi and Pharaoh that we get, we also receive designs that are either bland, boring, or downright offensively ugly. Part of a show's appeal, especially of cartoons, is the creative character designs. While this may not seem very important at first, you need to understand that having good character designs is a must for any good animated work to have. These designers are working long hours just to make sure that every important character on screen visually grabs you and keeps your attention for the remainder of each episode, which is strange, because Miraculous has some of the worst designs that I've seen to come out of the 2010s. And like I said earlier, some of these designs are okay at best, but these other ones, they look like the first drafts and the creators just ran with it. Like, who signed off on The Bubbler, Mr. Pigeon, and Gigantitan? Our Ladybug and Cat also suffer from this, but not in the way that you would think. Midway through the second season, Cat Noir and Ladybug obtain new transformations in the most convoluted way possible. In order to transform, the Kwamis must consume a potion to undergo metamorphosis. Well, okay, it shouldn't be that much of an issue, so long as it's a one-time thing. It's not. So, let me get this straight. In order to transform, Ladybug and Cat Noir must first de-transform, so that their little magical friends can absorb this concoction. What's even worse is that Marinette and Adrian decide to make specialized food for these potions so that Tiki and Plague, their special creatures, to have an easier time with the special magical brew. Sure, you can transform if you want to, but it's gonna take a few minutes. And I really hope that in the time that it takes you to do all this, Hawkmoth just doesn't attack you. And when I call these a bad design, I'm not necessarily talking about the visual aesthetics of the two costumes. No, in truth, I'm talking about how unbelievably stupid the practicality and versatility these transformations lack. While the Aqua and Space outfits do offer more mobility in some situations, the Ice one is just plain dumb. And quite frankly, giving these two transformations to accommodate for water and snow just takes away from the two main leads to be less creative when fighting the weakly akumatized victim. And here I was thinking that the Lucky Charm wasn't bad enough, seeing as though it's just a Deus Ex Machina. It honestly seems that the writing team just forgot all about the cool gadgets and gizmos that Ladybug and Cat Noir used early on. Not only that, but they seem to have forgotten about some super abilities that Cat Noir possessed. Hey, you remember that first episode where Cat Noir had night vision? What, you forgot all about it? No way. And then later on, it's also revealed that he has super hearing? All these transformations have done is simply take away what we already had. In exchange for flashier costumes, we've lost sight of our character's core abilities somehow. Now, I can hear you furiously typing down in the comment section as to the obvious reason why these new costumes were added. In fact, it's blatantly obvious.
Money!
Anybody who has even the faintest grasp on marketing understands this. They obviously wanted to sell more dolls and action figures, and that's fine. But what I'm wondering is why we've only seen 3 out of the 7 or 8 that were available so far. There's apparently multiple of these, so why haven't we seen any more? I mean, it's not like our characters can just fuse with other magical abilities on the side. Oh wait! Partway through developing the new abilities, the writers randomly remembered that they had other Kwamis with different magical abilities, and then just abandoned the additional power-ups. So instead of wasting their time brewing potions for them, Master Fu could have just simply given them other Miraculous. But he's not exactly the best mentor. Most of the time when you make a good character, you usually have to give them some kind of flaw. Maybe they're clumsy, maybe even prideful, or perhaps they're greedy. But chances are, most of your favorite characters have some kind of flaw in one way or another. This makes them more believable and grounded. But when it comes to Master Fu, not only does he have this, but these flaws that should make him a good character, make him a bad one. Now, normally the wise old mentor would show up and impart some words of wisdom onto his pupils. But Master Fu can't be bothered to do any of that. Most of the time, Marinette has to be told through the plot's MacGuffin, aka her lucky charm, to go visit Master Fu. He can't be bothered to go see her on his own. You know, I would think that the man who gifted her superpowers would want to encourage and support his proteges. But then again, he barely knows what the fuck he's doing. It's established in the story that Fu was raised by the Guardians of the Miraculous from a young age. Due to his inexperience and foolishness, Master Fu ended up destroying the temple and being the sole survivor of the Guardians. Until he wasn't. I'll get to Suhan later. And this could theoretically be explained away by the fact that he did lose the spellbook and 2 Miraculous. But to put it bluntly, this really can't explain everything.
You are still young. I'm only 186.
Wait a minute. Come again, Chief? How old are you again?
186.
Now see, that's a big problem. What most fans don't remember is how long the Master's been doing this for. This man has had multiple decades to figure out solutions and handle the secrets of the Miraculous, and it feels like he hasn't even been bothered to try. What's even worse is rather than giving them, the fox and the bee, he instead gives them the cat and Ladybug. Which brings us to this scene.
Such powers are meant to serve the greater good. They must never get into the wrong hands.
Fu? If they're so important, why on earth did you give them to 2 teenagers? Bear in mind, these are 2 kids that he barely even tested. He gave them 1 test and that was it. Is that all it takes? And when he hands the Miraculous off, he doesn't even bother to see if they want them. Nor does he teach them how to use them. He seemingly just leaves it in the hands of the Kwami, who had a hard enough time trying to convince both Adrian and Marinette, just Marinette, of trying to be a superhero. How did he know it was going to go over so well? He had no guarantee any of this was going to work. But this is a magical superhero show, Green Line. They had to get their powers somehow. I understand that. So why did the writers lean into the magical element? They could have easily written in an explanation that the Kwami simply bond with their host, and that's how the Miraculous holders are chosen. But this isn't the case. Clearly, it's Master Fu using his own judgment to choose holders, and he's clearly not very good at it. He gave them both the most standard good person test imaginable. And this doesn't even begin to cover the unbelievable favoritism to one of the 2 holders. But we'll get to you later, Adrian. Fu isn't the greatest teacher simply due to the fact that he's basically the blind leading the blind. But for the most part, what I look for in a mentor is someone you can also lean on and trust, and they'll be there for you. Like, for example, Uncle Iroh from Avatar: The Last Airbender, or heck, even Alfred from Batman. It seemed like he was barely around, and our heroes could barely rely on him, whether directly or indirectly. And if he couldn't fight for himself, then at the very least he could have tried to find other Miraculous holders. And for those saying he couldn't because of Hawkmoth and keeping the other Miraculous safe from him, clearly forgets that he gave 2 children the 2 Miraculous that Hawkmoth needs to fulfill his wish. He clearly wanted to take the risk there, so why didn't he just give 2 more Miraculous powers to somebody, I don't know, more reliable? Ugh, don't even get me started on this man's abhorrent love life. In the episode Backorder, we are introduced to Master Fu's love interest Marion. We are shown a scene of the two trying to escape what appears to be the city of Paris under siege during World War II. They split up, promising to find one another in the future. But when we see her again, she's still looking for Fu. Are you telling me that this man hasn't even bothered to look for the love of his life for like 6 decades? They could have found each other after the war. Are you telling me that the 2 of them didn't even bother to look in all that time? What has Fu been doing in the decades since he lost her? Apparently Thomas and the writing team didn't even think about how this would play out. They just came up with a simple concept and didn't even bother to explore it. Yeah, maybe I'll dig into that deeper later on in the video. Because it's one thing for Fu not to be engaged with the Miraculous, which is his responsibility, but it's another thing entirely for him not even to pursue these things in his personal life. Who or what is he hiding from after the war ended? And the fact that in the same flashback I just mentioned, it would seem that the people in pursuit of Fu and Marion knew about the Miracle Box.
We must get the box!
So, there are parts of the world that know about Miraculous. That's strange, because you would think people from time to time would show up looking for the Miraculous, but nothing ever comes of it. So instead we have Fu hiding out in Paris and running a Chinese medicine shop. A good guardian? I don't know. Maybe. A good lover? I don't think so. A good mentor? Absolutely not. While I'd like to talk about Chloe and the remainder of Season 3, there are a few things that I first need to make a note of. The first thing is the episode titled Time Tagger. It's the episode that introduces time travel. So while I was excited at first, seeing as though it gave us a glimpse into the future, over time I gradually became horrified at the realization of what the episode really means. But keep that in mind for later. The second thing that will be the main focus of this chapter of the video begins with the episode titled Animaestro. It has a couple of things to note. Firstly, Ladybug and Cat Noir's adventures have been made into a film. In an animated film to be specific, in fact. Harkening back and paying homage to the fact that this originally was supposed to be a 2D anime-inspired series by Toei Animation. Secondly, it's the only episode that I know of to feature different styles of animation. The fact that this film is being made just shows how popular Ladybug and Cat Noir seem to be in France. I mean, it is a bit surprising to see that the president of France isn't here or isn't mentioned throughout the rest of the show. You would think that if the director is making a film based on Ladybug and Cat Noir, these two are being recognized not only by Paris, but by the country of France itself. I'll talk about more on that later, but what you need to know now is how disappointed I was with this particular episode. Animaestro is the episode that acknowledges Cat Noir and Ladybug's original design as an anime. What I originally hoped for and envisioned was for part of the episode to take place in the animated universe when the director of the film got akumatized. But sadly, this is not the case. Unfortunately for me, all we got was a victim turning into various monsters that were animated differently. And ultimately all this led to was simply disappointment and a wasted idea. And all we have now is just a boring and generic episode. But little did I realize, until much, much later, that this episode presented a much bigger problem. Unfortunately, I was too naive to see it. I have failed to mention up until now that this episode does have one more significant thing about it. It has a special cameo appearance by the creator of Miraculous, Thomas Astruc. Now, what's the first thing that comes to your mind when you think cameo appearance? Probably something like the cameo appearances from Stan Lee in every Marvel movie, right? A very short and sweet clip of the creator of some of our favorite heroes. Oftentimes you will find cameo appearances from creators and directors in TV shows and film, and they all have one thing in common for the most part. They're all very short. It's a blink and you miss it type of situation. More often than not, you have to be on the lookout for these particular moments. But not here. Thomas has planted himself in an entire episode. Well, okay, he just wanted to make a special appearance. With the show that has over 100 episodes, that's not too big of an issue, I suppose. But not only is it Thomas playing himself, as the episode's villain, there seems to be special attention to his character, more so than there would be for others. And just look how he's transformed.
Oh, nobody could care less about me.
I want them all to see what a director is capable of.
Are you serious? At first you might think he's joking, but I'm pretty sure he's not. This man is whining about not being noticed as the series creator. Excuse me? If you're referring to the fan base, quite a few of them know who you are. Yes, I'm talking about the adults and teenagers who watch the show. But Thomas, if you're including kids, then of course they don't know who you are. They're children. The only people who might even be remotely recognized are the voice actors. If you're trying to be acknowledged by children, it's not going to happen. Most kids growing up with the Disney Renaissance didn't even know who Howard Ashman was at the time. He's one of the main guys who wrote all the good music for all those movies. Just in case you wanted to know. It's not until we become adults that we start to notice the people behind the curtain. The fact that he's so insecure about this should have been a massive red flag. But if you think I'm just being hyperbolic, take a look at this man's tweets. Thomas will argue with fans over how certain scenes and certain characters were handled instead of, oh, I don't know, ignoring them, or at least understanding where they're coming from and seeing if there can be any kind of middle ground. I feel that this episode was supposed to be a wink at the audience by Thomas, but instead, he just makes himself out to be an absolute megalomaniac. Most people are going to know who the creator is, so instead, you could have had some of the animators getting akumatized for being the ones who are actually not acknowledged by the public, and have Thomas be the one that they're after. But instead, I have to watch this grown man throw a temper tantrum from not being acknowledged by children. It's as if this episode was some kind of prelude for things to come. Events that would take place that would make this particular incident of Anna Maestro seem insignificant by comparison. Well, I suppose it's about time that I get to the part of the video where most Miraculous critics tend to get the most mileage. Chloe Bourgeois. Alright, ladies and gentlemen, let's take it from the top. In any series, there's probably a bully. Whether it's him, or this girl, or even that dude over there. And quite a few TV shows, especially in the 90s, you can bet there's at least one bully character. And for Miraculous, it's Chloe. On some occasions, she will present an obstacle for Marinette, but does little else, until the second season. In the episode, Zombie Zoo, Chloe continues her role as the brat throughout most of the episode. However, at the end of the episode, we are shown a small glimpse into her redemption. Wow, her character is actually evolving. Who would have thought? And that's not all the season has to offer. In the second season, the cast of superheroes is expanded. No longer is it just our dynamic duo, but now we get 3 more superheroes. And I could talk for quite a while about how I honestly prefer our dynamic duo compared to the Miraculous Avengers that we get, but the show does have to grow at some point. Behind door number 1, we have Alia. She will be taking the Fox Miraculous. Alright, let's show what we have behind door number 2. We have Nino. Congratulations, the best friend of our other lead character. I'm definitely not seeing a pattern here whatsoever. Nino gets the Turtle Miraculous. Move over, old man. The future is now. And behind door number 3 is Chloe? Unlike the previous two, Chloe receives the Bee Miraculous completely by accident, which makes sense in some ways, because I personally couldn't see Marinette handing off her Miraculous to one of her biggest enemies. So, Chloe getting this power completely by happenstance is probably the best way this could have happened. Now all that's left is to see what she's going to do with it. Upon receiving her Miraculous, Chloe fiddles with it and tries to figure out what it does. Or at least, I assume that's what happens. Poland just tells her what she needs to know. Which is interesting because you would think Master Fu would have told the Kwamis not to take instructions from strangers. So I guess we'll just have to add this to the long list of his mistakes. Anyways, in the episode Queen Wasp, we see Chloe put people in danger. Oh well, so she could save them. Afterwards, Ladybug and Cat Noir arrive on the scene to help Chloe, who is currently struggling to save the people she put in danger. Once our two heroes are able to defuse the situation, Ladybug chastises Chloe for being so reckless. Chloe, on the other hand, is so enthusiastic from being part of the team that Ladybug's criticisms honestly just go over her head. However, as Ladybug tries to retrieve the Miraculous, Chloe retreats home, having been embarrassed in front of TV reporters as well as her mother. The same mother whose approval she was trying to win, which is funny because that's something that the fans forget about. Some might say, well, she was just trying to get attention. She wanted the power so she could look cool, which is just the dumbest thing. She wanted the power so she could look cool. Sure, that's what it is. She wasn't trying to get her mother's approval or anything. Just think about this for a minute. She could care less about what the city of Paris thinks of her. She's the richest girl in the city, quite possibly the country. She doesn't need the approval of the people. She just wanted the attention and affection of her mother, as well as Ladybug, who is her hero. Anyways, all of this causes her to be manipulated by Hawkmoth, turning her into Queen Wasp. I've seen a lot of people claim, including the creator Thomas, that this is one of the many faults of Chloe. And yes, she was responsible for the train incident. But past this point, the people responsible for Queen Wasp are obviously Hawkmoth and Ladybug herself. I'm curious why so many people only remember certain scenes in this show. If this was any other character, Marinette would have handled this far more tactfully, pulling Chloe aside and talking with her in regards to the Miraculous, and saying it's dangerous because Hawkmoth knows who possesses one, and everyone knows where she lives, including him. But Marinette failed at this. Not only does she not try and attempt to calm Chloe down and take the Miraculous after having this conversation, but could have easily taken it after she de-transforms, because Ladybug and Cat Noir know where Chloe lives. I mean, just take a minute, just think about this for a second. What if this was anybody else? Say, Kim. I could easily see this if this was one of their classmates. Both Ladybug and Cat Noir would reasonably try and talk to Kim and explain to him why having the Miraculous is something you have to earn, and replace Kim with anybody else, and you see my point. This just happens with Chloe, and most of the fan base justifies it, not even stopping to think if this is reasonable or not. What's even more fascinating is that this conversation that I was talking about between Marinette/Ladybug and Chloe actually takes place in the following episode. And you want to know what happens? After pressing Chloe for just a little bit, Chloe finally breaks and opens up to our heroine.
Actually, I don't even care about her. It's because I have no reason to be here. Nobody likes me. I have no friends. I'm useless.
It was at this point that a large portion of the fan base started rooting for Chloe, and it's not hard to see why. Redemption arcs, especially if they're done well, can be some of the most rewarding parts of any story. Seeing a character who's an absolute piece of garbage, an absolute waste of space, and seeing that same character pull a 180 can be very rewarding to see.
I'm sorry for everything.
See, this totally works if you do it right. People like to see characters change over the course of a story, but then Miraculous decided to pull all that character development out of Chloe and throw it in the trash can. Okay guys, take this next part with a heavy grain of salt. From what I've heard, Thomas was away when these initial episodes for Chloe were made. Somebody else had written them, and when he came back, he wasn't too happy and decided to rewrite her entire redemption arc. Supposedly, and this is a heavy supposedly, so bear that in mind, Chloe is based off of one of his bullies from school, and that's why he wanted to throw Chloe in the dump. He simply refused to give her a redemption arc. It does explain why she has one, and then later it's thrown away. Let me explain what I'm talking about. In the episode Miraculous, we are shown that Chloe still wants to be Queen Bee. She even made her own bee signal, which is kind of funny. After Rena Rouge and Carapace are called in, all the Nino's alter egos, Chloe feels left out. This causes Hawkmoth to try to kumatize her, and this is where we see Chloe fight against it. As far as I know, this is the first time that anyone has fought against Hawkmoth and mentally won. So instead, her friend Sabrina turns into the villain instead. And so reluctantly, Ladybug gives Chloe the Bee Miraculous to help fend off Sabrina, who has taken everybody else's powers. After everything is resolved, however, Chloe is forced to return the Miraculous, and Ladybug tells her that she can never be Queen Bee again. The episode ends with Chloe tearing up a photo of her and Ladybug. This would mark the start of the writing team, mainly Thomas, dismantling Chloe's redemption arc. And a good portion of the fans just accept this, as if Chloe herself was responsible for the drift between herself and Ladybug. But you couldn't be further from the truth. The people responsible for this drift are Natalie, Gabriel, and Lila, who is just Chloe 2.0, but far worse. Chloe herself isn't responsible, but most of the fan base just simply forgets who plotted against Chloe in the first place.
This is despicable!
All these aspects would culminate and combine with the season 3 finale. After being rejected by Ladybug several times, Chloe finally decides to join Hawkmoth, who at this point has put his plan into motion. He ends up fighting the Guardian, Master Fu, and a fight breaks out between him and Mayura versus the Guardian. Eventually, he succeeds and is able to take the Miracle Box. From here, he manipulates Chloe and turns her into Miracle Queen. Something important to take note of here is that Chloe, as Miracle Queen, was able to find out who the other Miraculous holders were. This also means that Gabriel and Natalie were also privy to this information, as they were there to see it unfold. My point being is that Chloe, Gabriel, and Natalie know who the other Miraculous holders are. Anyways, Ladybug and Cat Noir are able to defeat Chloe and her army and retrieve all the Miraculous. This came at the cost of Master Fu, however, who would end up relinquishing his role as Guardian to Marinette. But it also came at the cost of Chloe's redemption arc, as well as her character. At the end of Season 3, Chloe is bitter and angry at Ladybug. During this finale, Hawkmoth akumatizes both of her parents, and hoping that Ladybug will give her a Miraculous, Chloe waited for her to arrive. But instead she chose Kagami, a character who had been introduced in Season 2 as a rival of Marinette's to win Adrian's affection. That's what led Ladybug to give Kagami a Miraculous, because, at the time, she was with Adrian. And because Marinette was jealous, she ended up pulling her away from Adrian, with the excuse of, "I need you to help me save the city." So, the people at fault here are Lila, Gabriel, Natalie, and Marinette herself. She even admits this.
It's my fault. I didn't transform back before I went to find him.
What?
I was confused. I'm sorry. I'm such a failure.
It was at this point that a good portion of the fan base just simply had to walk away. Chloe probably had been one of the more interesting characters of the show. Not a good one, but she was still interesting. Mainly because she had a redemption arc. Heck, even before that, she had a little bit of sass, and albeit a little charisma as well. So when the creator turns around and destroys a character, and then has the gall to tell you, you were wrong, she was never a good person. As you can imagine, this left a very sour taste with fans. What's even more baffling is that they didn't take this opportunity to make her a villain. So all that you're left with is a character who has regressed, and all this does is turn her into a joke. And it's with a heavy heart that I tell you, she wasn't the only one. Kim is a character who I wouldn't say is very deep, though to his credit, not too many of the cast really are. He's a good-natured guy, a prankster, and he loves to swim. A little too much, but I wouldn't call him a bad guy. His pranks can get a little out of hand, but they're never malicious. His actions are that of a teenager, and slowly, he's been stepping out of that role more and more as the seasons have gone on. We finally saw this in Season 3 with Party Crasher. He was finally a hero. So, who the fuck is this?
It was just a practical joke.
That's not Kim. For any normal episode, he would have seen that Marinette was distressed and would have tried to fix it. Especially since he knew the reason why. Add to the fact that he's still good friends with Adrian. He wouldn't want to ruin his day with Marinette because they're still good friends. On top of all this, his girlfriend is there. So you would think that he would try and not make himself look like a complete ass. But I had to go and skip ahead to Season 5 to go over this. So I imagine some of you are confused, so let me go over the Season 5 episode Derision and the Assassination of Kim. In this episode, we are given a flashback into Marinette's past. What triggers this particular plot point is her apparent trauma with the swimming pool and its most frequent visitor and old friend of Marinette's, Kim. Back before the series began, Marinette had a crush on Kim. Yeah, I know, weird, right? She eventually works up the courage to ask him to the swimming pool. Once they get there, though, things don't go so well for Marinette. Kim, on Chloe's order, Kim has a crush on Chloe for most of the series, until he gets together with Undine. Kind of. It's weird. Basically, Chloe orders Kim to bring Marinette with a box of spiders. Marinette, thinking that this is a gesture of love, takes the box and opens it. And it's here that part of the fan base, that still watches Miraculous anyways, turned against Kim. After the flashback, Kim is shown not to be remorseful and completely oblivious to what he had done. With places like Twitter and YouTube, you will find people discussing this, saying that, this was always the case, and it makes perfect sense. That's why he's the only one Marinette didn't give a Miraculous to. And all I'm left wondering is how many fans have this level of selective memory. But no, I'm the one with selective memory. Green Line, you forgot all about Kim's pranks in the earlier seasons, like the one with Ivan in the Origins episode. Yeah, I remember. But that was an earlier Kim. We are also talking about the same character that had moments like this.
Thank you, young man.
Helping others should always be a natural reflex.
People will tell you that this was always the true nature of Kim. This episode was to show us how dangerous Kim is. I'll tell you what it really is. A retcon. See, theoretically, this could have worked, but we've already seen Marinette in far more troubling situations. I would think that after the events of, I don't know, Cat Blanc, she would need more therapy for something like that than just spiders. She's seen an entire world destroyed and an alternate version of herself completely dissolve right before her eyes. That right there would give me trauma. Seeing someone I trust and care about go completely insane and destroy the world is something that I think might require therapy. So when I see Marinette struggle with things like this, but then be completely traumatized by the pool, then I can't take it seriously. Oh yeah, and there's also this little teeny tiny microscopic plot hole. She's been to the pool before!
Wait, where are you?
At the swimming pool? We're still waiting, girl.
Oops! You want to talk about selective memory? Well then there you go. Not only has she been to the pool before with her friends, but in the second clip, she's at the pool saving the very person who gave her her traumatic experience. Heck, this isn't even the first time she saved Kim. She saved him back in season 1 and even brought him to her house. Oh, but Green Line, she was Ladybug and she was saving Kim. She was able to push her trauma aside when she's a superhero. Okay. But what about in the episode Troublemaker? In that episode, her self-preservation is present when Cat Noir is in her room. She is embarrassed and doesn't want him to see her pictures of Adrian. Now, if you remember, she doesn't know Cat Noir is Adrian, so she's just doing this because she's still embarrassed. So, if that's the case, then why isn't she traumatized in either of these situations? Because it's retroactive continuity, and the writers were hoping you wouldn't notice. It's their way of writing Kim to be a terrible person because this show is low-key sexist towards men.
You know what men are like.
The only outlier is Chloe, who is not only rewritten as a terrible person, but then they doubled down in this episode just so that the critics can shut the hell up.
Don't be mad at her. She's this way because her mother left her when she was young.
So did mine, and you don't see me having fun pulling Marinette.
Ah, yes. Let's get rid of that pesky mother argument that they keep using. And finally, Thomas uses trauma to shield Marinette from the one criticism that has been lobbied at her from even the most diehard of fans. She's a fucking creep.
I wonder where he'd be.
He's got fencing club after school. That's why he didn't pick up.
Happy birthday, Adrian.
Adrian's joypad. I have to clean my room. We're too far away. She dumped the book in the trash bin. I can't tell you that these are the gifts I've made for Adrian's next 35 birthdays. And Adrian would think that I'm totally crazy. Wait, maybe I am. It even smells exactly like him. Why haven't we been molded together in the plaster of destiny? Wax lips against wax lips.
I've avoided talking about this particular aspect of Marinette's character because I thought it was talked about enough amongst the fan base. But since this episode's release, I've changed my mind. Throughout season 1, Marinette was a bit of a clumsy and nervous girl. She was a character that most people can kind of relate to. But starting in seasons 2 and 3, certain character traits were added on that made her a bit stalkerish and sometimes downright creepy.
Me? A stalker? Ha! I mean, of course I wouldn't really stalk him. Oh, am I kidding?
And because of this, many people started to turn away from the show. And so, instead of, I don't know, addressing these problems, Thomas instead decided to use trauma.
It wasn't your fault, Marinette. I'll never tell another boy that I love him before I know everything about him.
See, Marinette isn't a creeper, she's just misunderstood. She has trauma, and that excuses all of her behavior. They used trauma as an excuse for her unacceptable behavior, and most people fell for it. Hook, line, and sinker. It only caused the characters of Chloe and Kim to be sacrificed on the altar of propping up Marinette. It's ridiculous. Utterly ridiculous. Hey, you guys enjoying the video? If you could hit the like and subscribe button, that would mean a whole lot to me. This video has taken so much time out of me and my editor, and so much energy, and if you could just do that for me, just as a quick favor, that'd be great. I think it's about time that I get to the subject that inspired me to make this video in the first place. Adrien/Cat Noir. But before I go into full detail about Miraculous's secondary protagonist, I have a question. What's the name of this show?
Miraculous Ladybug.
Nope.
Miraculous Ladybug.
That's wrong.
Miraculous Ladybug.
That's not it either.
Miraculous Ladybug.
That isn't the name of the show. The show is called Miraculous, Tales of Ladybug and Cat Noir. But Green Line, Miraculous Ladybug is just an abbreviation for the show. Yes, but why not just call it Miraculous? Because, despite having two leads, this show would rather hyper-focus on one particular character. In any other television show, the story would divert and show us what the other characters are doing at any given time. Let's use Avatar: The Last Airbender as an example. In the episode Sokka's Master, most of the main cast are absent except for a few scenes. Sokka's the one that we have to focus on because he needs to learn how to fight. Or even Batman, the animated series. There's an entire episode dedicated to Harley Quinn and Poison Ivy taking on Gotham all by themselves. The Batman himself barely shows up in this episode. Almost every series has to divert from the main character at some point. If you don't, it can get really boring very quickly. It's a good thing for a series to take the time to observe the supporting cast. And with all that being said, what do we really know about Nino? Or how about Kim? Or even Julika? Have we ever had an episode that's solely focused on them? Yes, we know a couple things about them, but in comparison to some other characters, I feel that we know very little about them. This is mostly due to the fact that Marinette is taking most of the screen time. Here, let me just give you an example. In the episode Party Crashers, the boys try to get together and throw a party for Adrien. This would have been a good opportunity to see things from their perspective. Maybe the guys tease Nino about his relationship with Alia. Or maybe we could have gotten a moment between all of them, having each of the guys talk about their dads. But we didn't get any of this. Instead, it's an episode where the guys try to have fun, and Marinette ends up breaking into Adrien's house. Again, this show has to shove Marinette into every scene despite her not being relevant, and cram her down our throats, despite the fact that we need more breathing room for other characters. And this couldn't be any more true than for Adrien, our supposed secondary main lead. As much as I'd like to believe that the issues with Adrien began in Season 2, sadly, they started all the way back in the beginning with Season 1. But when the show began, I really didn't think much of this. In the earlier episodes, it seemed as though there was still teamwork between the two of them. A good example of this is in Lady Wi-Fi. As Ladybug takes on the evil Alia, she entrusts Cat Noir to disable the Wi-Fi tower. But as the season continued, I started to see cracks that would evolve into a much bigger problem as the series went on. The first example I'm going to give is in the episode Copycat. In this episode, Adrien is the one who causes an artist to become akumatized. This would have been the perfect time to show Cat Noir take some responsibility for his actions. A chance for him to clean up his own mess, if you will. But instead, this would be the first of many opportunities that the series would take to just prop up Ladybug. This could have been a phenomenal example to show how our two heroes work together and Ladybug willing to help her cat sort out his business. But instead, she does this.
I'm better than both of you!
Wow, what a bitch. And then there's episodes like Princess Fragrance. Marinette has to help Tiki, who's fallen ill. That's kind of weird, okay. So, this would have been an ideal moment for Adrien to step up to the plate as a hero. But instead, he becomes brainwashed and becomes a liability. Okay, what about this episode, The Puppeteer? This time around, it's Minot who gets akumatized and takes control of the dolls that Marinette created while she was babysitting her. This leads Cat Noir to go to Marinette's house to try to stop the dolls from being taken.
I don't like the idea of Cat Noir rummaging around in my room.
Oh, that's rich coming from you, seeing as though you don't have a problem rummaging around in his room.
He Adrian sinned!
So, after Ladybug is done being a hypocrite, we get this scene.
You know I like to be in command.
You mean second in command.
Hold up. Why does that even matter? As a matter of fact, I don't even think he's talking about being in command of their team. I think he's talking about being in control of his own body.
Before she takes control of the other dolls, and me!
In context, that makes a lot more sense. Which, of course, later on is absolutely thrown out the window because yet again he's taken control of. Thomas would rather have him be more of a liability than a proper partner. Got it. But you know what's interesting? I think some parents started to notice. The final episode that I will bring up for this season is Anti-Bug. In this episode, Sabrina gets akumatized, but then, after she's defeated, Chloe becomes the monster of the week. Finally. But what's particularly weird about this episode is that instead of making the lesson about listening to the people around you, including your enemies, this episode weirdly pivots to the lesson about teamwork between our two heroes.
You're nothing without your Cat Noir. Cat Noir and I are a team. If you take me on, you take Cat Noir on too.
This comes completely out of nowhere. There was no setup in this episode that alluded to this, to the fact that Ladybug and Cat Noir were growing distant, and our main heroine not valuing her partner's time. And so I can only imagine why this aspect exists is probably because parents complained about the secondary main lead being useless 90% of the time, and it only goes downhill from here.
This is so dumb.
While I was somewhat oblivious in Season 1 to the show's bias of its main heroine, by the time Season 2 rolled around, I slowly began to acknowledge the truth. With Season 2 featuring more heroes, Marinette finds herself getting closer with Master Fu, learning about the other Miraculous and learning how to upgrade her abilities. She even gets to entrust another Miraculous to her best friend. So, you would think that Adrian would have received the same treatment. He does not. When Alia receives her Miraculous, Cat Noir isn't allowed to know her identity, which is kind of weird. What if Ladybug needed Cat Noir to ask her for help? He would need to know the identity of Rena Rouge. How is he supposed to find her? What if Ladybug is about to transform back and Cat Noir happens to have more time on his ring from his cataclysm? I understand that there might be a few dangers with Cat Noir knowing her identity, but this is mostly a net positive, as well as the fact that he's supposed to be, Ladybug's partner. So keeping him in the dark just seems rather bizarre. And on top of all that, Adrian isn't allowed to know about the Master. I would think that Ladybug at some point would have told Cat Noir about Master Fu, but she doesn't. She just leaves him completely in the dark for a good chunk of the season, and we aren't even given an excuse. The first time her lucky charm tells her to visit the Master, she just completely skips out on Cat Noir. She doesn't tell him where she's going, or why. And it's not as if the Master tells her to keep him uninformed. She just does this because...
Do you put the noodles in the water before the water boils?
Oh no, I'll get to that, but that came later. He doesn't tell her this until the later episodes. So, this is Marinette making this decision all on her own. I distinctly remember the Master telling her how important it is to keep the Miraculous safe. What I don't remember, however, is the Master telling Marinette to keep Cat Noir away from him. However, Master Fu does eventually tell her not to inform her partner. For some reason, when Marinette came to visit him and learn more about the Miraculous, Adrian was completely left out. And no, I'm not talking about him not being able to be present because they're not allowed to know each other's secret identities, which, trust me, I'll get into that later, don't you worry. I'm strictly speaking about the fact that the Master didn't bother to visit him. This ultimately comes to a head in the episode Siren, and it was at this point that I realized Adrian is probably the most tragic character of this show. This episode starts off with a team up with Rena Rouge. After the job is done, Ladybug and Rena go off so that Marinette can retrieve the Miraculous from Alia. Cat Noir is obviously curious at this point as to the identity of his new team member. Why shouldn't he be? But Ladybug shoots him down, but promises to ask the Master. It's at this point that we get the dumbest answer from him as to why Adrian can't be in the loop.
That's because there's a right time for everything.
This right here is such a non-answer. Okay, fine. For the sake of argument, let's translate this for what it is. It's not the appropriate time for Cat Noir to know about the Master or the other Miraculous, presumably. But here's the kicker. We're never told why. Marinette can be informed about the other Miraculous and its history, as well as being taught by the Master, but Adrian isn't on his radar, and we're never given a reason why. Oh, one could say he didn't want to take on another student, or that he thought it was too dangerous for too many people to know about the Miraculous. at least these are excuses. They're not very good ones, but at least there's something. It's only until the climax of this episode, and Adrien is about to abandon his position as Cat Noir, that Master Fu actually shows up. On top of that, it was Marinette's suggestion, because this series needs to solely revolve around our queen, and nobody else. Don't believe me? As the next couple seasons continue, Marinette just seems to get closer to the Master. He's practically a second father figure to her. But by contrast, Adrien is the only one given one scene at the end of Siren. Look at it, take it all in. This is the last time you will ever see these two alone in any meaningful manner ever again. And you want to know something funny? Between the two of them, I would think Master Fu would have tried teaching Adrien more.
Does the disappearance of Atlantis ring a bell with you?
I'd had too much cheese.
The Leaning Tower of Pisa?
I didn't see it.
Dinosaurs!
Oh, yeah, okay, no, I did go too far there, but I was young.
Did you catch all that? He would rather teach Marinette, whose Kwame is far more responsible, than teach Cat Noir anything about being responsible with the Miraculous that could blow up the planet. Well, at least with Nino getting Miraculous, we should have a cool moment between the two of them and see Adrien entrust an amazing power to his best friend. Go and fuck yourself.
This is the Miraculous of the turtle. You will use it for the greater good.
What the fuck? I thought this would have been an amazing opportunity for Adrien to step up to the plate. But yet again, I was wrong. Because this needs to be Marinette's moment to give Nino the Eternal Miraculous. She barely knows Nino, or at least Adrien knows him better. This is his best friend. Heck, Marinette was allowed to give a Miraculous to her best friend, so seeing Adrien entrust this amazing power to Nino would have been perfect. But Marinette can't help but steal that spotlight. You know what? I'm done. Let's move on.
Not the tongues.
While Season 3 is the least egregious in terms of shafting Cat Noir, it still does have its moments. The first example I'm going to bring up might as well be the poster child for this show's favoritism towards Ladybug, Reflect All. This episode is unique for featuring one of the few instances where Marinette and Adrien switch powers. You would think this would be interesting, seeing as though the events leading up to this were our two heroes arguing over whose job was harder. The setup here is for our two heroes to switch abilities and appreciate one another by the end of the episode, understanding how difficult it is for one another to do their jobs. But that's not what happens here. Instead, Adrien struggles in his Ladybug persona, seemingly unable to use the yo-yo at first. Meanwhile, Marinette is instantly amazing. She doesn't need any time to figure it out. She's just that good. Are you starting to see the pattern here? The only time she struggles is when she uses the Cataclysm, but it's instantly negated by the fact when Adrien admits this is the first time it's been used on a Sentimonster. So, Marinette didn't really make a mistake because neither of them knew what would happen. In the meantime, Adrien seemingly gets a moment to shine when he uses the Lucky Charm. Basically, he's able to summon the exact item he wanted. Cool. But then it's instantly thrown away when the remainder of the episode has Marinette chastising him and holding his hand through every step of the process, ultimately leading her to figure it out all by herself. This episode wanted to position itself as Ladybug and Cat Noir trying to understand how difficult the other one has it, but it ultimately fails even at that. And if you think it can't get any worse, you'd be very wrong. Kwame Buster proves beyond a shadow of a doubt that Adrien means nothing and Marinette is everything. When their science teacher gets akumatized, Ladybug and Cat Noir must face off against her, but she has gained the power to absorb the Kwame, effectively making both their powers useless. Marinette is able to get to Master Fu and obtain more abilities. However, her partner gets nothing. Despite taking multiple Miraculous, Marinette neglects to inform the Kwames to give Cat Noir one, so that he could aid her and help her fight. Of course, part of the excuse is that Adrien might have to learn Ladybug's secret identity, which as of this moment is a big no-no, for some reason.
Cat Noir might discover my secret identity!
But I'll talk about that retcon later. But it's not until the end of the episode that the show gives us the biggest middle finger up until this point.
No Miraculous owner in all of history has ever been mentally and physically strong enough to use that many Miraculous at the same time.
Marinette truly is special, Master.
Hey, Fu, how would you know? You've only had the box for a short time now, at least in the context of the Miraculous that have been around for, I don't know, millions of years. There have been so many holders, how would you know which ones were the best? I'm sure there are plenty of Ladybugs and Cat Noirs that were far better than Marinette. Since she's just a teenager, she barely had the Miraculous for a couple of years, if that. All this scene does is annoy me for how disrespectful it is, not only to Cat Noir, but on top of that, the previous holders. And most importantly, the audience. We were the ones disrespected the most, because the show wants us to believe that she's amazing, because they say she's amazing, and no other reason. Feast is up next, and it's not the worst actually. Cat Noir and Ladybug help Master Fu defend himself against a monster from his past, called Feast. A monster that can devour anything, and anyone. And we even get more from Master Fu's backstory, as it gets fully fleshed out. But sadly, that's as far as my praise will extend. Because at the end of the episode, Master Fu completely ignores Adrian, who's standing right next to him, and only praises Marinette.
Thank you, Ladybug. Because of you, I won't have to run anymore.
Hey Fu, Adrian's standing right there. To add insult to injury, the master decides to pass down the role of guardian to Marinette, without even considering his other student.
And the time has come for me to prepare you to become the new guardian.
That's right, Cat Noir, you get nothing, despite working as hard as Ladybug. Alright, what's next? Oh, great, Time Tagger. Now, while there are plenty of issues with this episode, you know, because it's the one that introduces time travel, I personally don't have too many problems with it. For the purposes of this segment, I'll just briefly mention future Alex taking a jab at Cat Noir.
It was actually your fault, or more precisely, it will be.
See? In the future, that's exactly how you damaged my Miraculous.
Because no other team member could possibly cause problems in the future. The only other major issue I have is, well, you know what? I'll talk about that later. In the meantime, if you want anything in regards to Miraculous's terrible timeline shenanigans, check out Artistic Ayla Bell's videos on that. Oh, well, would you look at that? We've made it full circle back to Party Crasher. Alright, you know the drill. The boys throw a party for Adrian, blah blah blah, the writers can't help but put Marinette in every scene, yada yada yada, and Ladybug gets captured this episode. Finally, this is the perfect opportunity for Cat Noir to shine and learn some identities of the holders.
Don't go in there alone. You'll never pull this off by yourself.
Give me my lady back!
Motherfucker! Son of a bitch! Oh, no, I'm just... I guess we can't have Adrian doing anything. And yes, this is a pattern. I don't care what you say, this is a pattern. And it only gets worse. I knew we were going to have to talk about this sooner rather than later. Felix, and more importantly, Cat Blanc. Now, to me, Felix isn't all that important of an episode, or at least at first glance. This episode is the first to establish the titular character of Felix, Adrian's cousin. Your eyes aren't deceiving you, they look exactly the same. They're identical. This isn't an important detail that won't come up later, I swear. Anyways, getting back to the plot of this episode, all you need to know is that Felix is way too clever for this show. He tries using his wits to outsmart Cat Noir and Ladybug. While our two heroes are able to win in the end, it's at this point in the series that they establish that Felix is one of the few characters who's allowed to use his brain. And I bring all this up in the Adrian chapter of this video because I absolutely subscribe to the idea that parts of the fanbase came up with. The idea that Felix is just a substitution for Adrian's character growth. Have you noticed that? A lot of things that Felix does feels like it was meant for Adrian. The confrontation that he has with his uncle Gabriel would feel far more impactful if it was, oh, I don't know, Gabriel's son. And now it's time for probably the most infamous episode of the season, Cat Blanc. This episode was probably the turning point for a large number of the fan base, because at this point in the story, certain members of the fan base started to heavily question certain writing decisions that just didn't sit right with them. Things like, oh, Marinette being creepy again, time travel shenanigans, and Gabriel's questionable character development. But when it comes to Adrian specifically, then I have to ask the question of why he barely feels relevant in a story that mainly revolves around him. In this episode, it's mainly Marinette's problem, and she alone has to deal with her partner's rampage upon the world. Now, I hear you typing in that comment section that this was originally caused by Marinette, so it makes sense that Bunnix would have her fix the problem that Marinette made. But the problem I have is that Cat Noir doesn't have any involvement whatsoever. He isn't even told what happened after everything is said and done, despite the fact that I would think that older Alex and Marinette would have at least tried to talk to Cat Noir and let him know what happened. You know,
what happened?
Brother, you kind of blew up the world there. Maybe we should, give you a few details. Maybe not everything, but just a few details about what happened. All this does is tell me that throughout these seasons, Adrian is nothing more than a background character. A background character in a story that should partly be about him. But despite what I've said, none of this really compares to how egregious everything is in Season 4.
I'm really sorry, Cat Noir.
I should have told you.
While I have talked at length about the egregious treatment of Adrian throughout the first 3 seasons, nothing really compares to the absolute dog water that we get in Season 4. While Miraculous's 4th season doesn't start off too harsh for our black cats, it does, however, unveil itself to be the culmination of every problem with Cat Noir. What the first few seasons lacked in terms of promoting Marinette as the primary and only protagonist, Season 4 completely obliterates Adrian to practically being a background character. At least with seasons 1 through 3, the two heroes at least were somewhat equal when it came to their jobs, protecting the city of Paris. While I've ranted at length about how Master Fu showed unbelievable favoritism towards Ladybug, he did eventually show himself to Adrian. So now, Ladybug and Cat Noir were at least equals for a short amount of time. However, Season 4 sees Marinette become the Guardian, and it's here where things for Adrian go from bad to absolutely catastrophic. When the season first picks up, the story does mention that Marinette is now the Guardian, and Adrian supposedly doesn't care, so long as his relationship with Ladybug doesn't change. Famous last words there, Adrian. Famous last words. To be honest with you though, I'm rather disappointed that he didn't mention Master Fu. Like, how did Adrian feel once he left? Did he have anything to say about their former master? But he just doesn't say anything at all. Well, I guess it's okay. With Marinette not feeling very good and having to constantly keep up secrets with her friends and family, I'm looking forward to when she finally opens up to Cat Noir.
And I am Ladybug.
This moment right here is when I finally decided to walk away from Miraculous. I get it, to many Miraculous fans, this was an amazing moment, but for me, this was more of a slap in the face. Look, Ollie is Marinette's best friend, so I understand why she's the one being told. I don't have a problem with that specifically. The problem I have is that the minute this happened, the show instead was going to become Miraculous, Tales of Ladybug and Rena Rouge. And wouldn't you know it, this thing that I was afraid of is the exact thing that happened. In the next episode, Marinette and Alia take on Mr. Pigeon. Yes, he's still around. The entire episode features the two of them teaming up and taking him down. Meanwhile, Adrian, can you guess what happens? Becomes a liability. Oh, and also Marinette gets an upgrade, and she's able to create charms that block Hothma's Akumas.
If my power is the power of creation...
Yes, create! Your only limits are the ones you put on yourself.
Yep, no other user thought to themselves, I wonder if I can make that. And if you just think I'm bullying these two girls, I need you to consider something. Was there any other way that the show could have had Alia discover this? Maybe another user had written down something similar to the lucky charm that protected the civilians physically. Or maybe another user had gone up against a rogue Cat Noir and maybe needed a protective charm. There were dozens of ways to frame this instead of, oh, I know what we're gonna do. We're gonna do something that's never been done before. Use the Miraculous's abilities as they were intended. Brilliant! Despite all this, does Cat Noir get an upgrade? No, of course he doesn't. And also fans at the time might have thought Adrian would have been given his time to shine, but sadly this day would never come, and it'd only continue to get worse from here on out. And to prove my point, Senti Bubbler is up next. This episode's main theme is trust, which is funny because Marinette or Alia can't be bothered to trust Cat Noir even with his own job. I find this extremely insulting because only a few episodes ago, Adrian had complete faith in Ladybug while fighting Kagami.
I trust you.
Cat Noir, no!
My man is literally doing a trust fall. Meanwhile, Ladybug can't entrust him with basic information. And this information, mind you, could help Marinette and Alia immensely. There is danger here. Why are they trying to keep this bizarre protocol with someone who, quite frankly, should be in the know? And Rocketeer continues the downward spiral. Interestingly enough though, this is one of the few episodes where Marinette kind of takes a back seat. The episode instead focuses on Alia, Nino, and Adrian. The premise this time is that Nino starts to become jealous of Cat Noir, thinking that the superhero is trying to steal his girlfriend, without realizing that it's actually his best friend. And so the usual stuff happens, like Nino getting akumatized, fighting Cat Noir, and finally being brought back thanks to Alia's efforts, convincing him that she still loves him. When it comes to Adrian this episode, it's his fight as Cat Noir with Nino, and this scene.
Alia's a superhero. She's Rena Rouge.
As a side note, this made Nino hated among the fanbase, and even suggesting that Alia should break up with him. But what I'm wondering is why all of them gave Alia a pass. She tells Nino her secret at the end of this episode, and nobody so much as bats an eye. But what people seem to forget is who Nino told. It wasn't a reporter or some stranger. He was telling his best friend. And he told it to him in confidence because he was hurt and needed someone to talk to. Just like a certain somebody at the end of a certain episode.
I'm Ladybug.
Makes you think, doesn't it? Anyways, getting back to Adrian, this information leaves him devastated. He can't believe what he's hearing. To think that someone he trusts completely doesn't trust him at all. And it's completely heartbreaking. And if you think that Thomas is going to take this opportunity and actually give him a compelling character arc mixed with drama and heartache, well, I guess you wouldn't be here an hour into this video, now would you? Although, on your first watch through, you might have thought they're going to take this somewhere. At least I did when I first watched it. They have to do something with this development. Surely, Hakusen is next on my schedule, and not only is it a terrible name for an episode, but it's also important for the fact that it has the first appearance of a new hero. Well, kind of. This is the first appearance of Alia in the form of Ladybug, Scarabella. Marinette finds herself taking a trip to London with her family, claiming that she can't be in London and be Ladybug in Paris at the same time, even though she's the Guardian and possesses a Miraculous that has the ability to teleport, that she used a few episodes ago. Why? Anyways, her solution is to hand it off to Alia, entrusting her best friend with the protection of the city. She forgets to tell Cat Noir, because of course she does. And so Adrian discovers Scarabella, engages in a fight, defeats her, and ends up taking a Miraculous, only to discover it's Alia, someone he knows very well. Why does Alia have the Ladybug Miraculous? Does she know Ladybug? What happened to the previous Ladybug? At least, that's what would have happened if the show was written by competent people. Alia defeats him, because of course she does. It's not like she's had the Miraculous for all of 5 minutes or anything. And Cat Noir, he's seen Ladybug use the Miraculous time and time again. He knows how it works. And on top of all that, he's used this Miraculous himself. How did he lose this fight? Oh, that's right. He's not allowed to do anything in this show. Okay, all this being said, there is an opportunity here for Adrian to teach the new Ladybug how to use her abilities. Not only that, it's probably the best time for him to take charge as the team leader. Or not. I mean, he does help Alia when she does fall for a trap set by Robustus. But that's only for a few seconds before he leads them into another trap. Good job, Adrian. You were useful for 10 seconds. Anyways, Alia comes up with a plan to win and save the day. The day is saved. Cat Noir gets a pot stuck on his head. Okay. Wow. Thomas, you're really stretching my suspension of disbelief on how dumb Adrian is. Marinette and Alia meet up after her trip, and Alia tells Marinette that Ladybug needs to talk with Cat Noir. Yes, this is the moment that I've been waiting for. We're about to put all our cards on the table and get into some really juicy stuff. Maybe Adrian will threaten to quit the team if she pulls another stunt like this ever again.
You didn't hurt my feelings. You did everything right.
What the fuck? Did that sound weird to you? Because it should have. This is what gaslighting sounds like. Thomas is gaslighting his own audience, instead of framing it as a mistake on Ladybug's part for not telling Cat Noir about the switch-up. This was a genuine mistake that she even admits, only for it to be thrown away. No, he's just in love with her. It's not the fact that she's breached his trust and has kept him in the dark for most of their career as heroes. He just loves her too much and doesn't want to see her leave. What a load of BS. I think a lot of people tend to forget that this is also a job that the two of them have. And the fact that she kept Cat Noir in the dark for a good portion of it is actually affecting her partner emotionally. And that's not all. Because she's still keeping this information from him, this can actually negatively affect their job. Like with the episode Senti Bubbler. Because both Alia and Marinette decided not to inform him about the plan that he could have compromised. They could have lost the mission because he went rogue, and it would have been entirely their fault. Poor communication can definitely lead to their downfall, and they should tread carefully, but they're not going to. I think the final episode I'm going to talk about in Season 4 is Kuroneko, seeing as though it's the crescendo of Ladybug's poor communication towards Cat Noir. And what a way to cap it off. A complete joke of an episode. This episode begins with Ladybug calling upon her friends to become heroes and leaving out, guess who? Adrian, as you can imagine, isn't too happy about this and thinks that he's pretty much being replaced. It's really odd that Marinette just forgets about Cat Noir. Instead of relying on her longtime partner, she just decides to give every other hero the chance. With Marinette being in a hurry, she completely blows off Cat Noir, which ultimately causes him to decide to abandon his position as a superhero and leave behind his Cat Miraculous. Miraculous. I don't know why he has to do that, because if it were me, I'd just keep it and leave the team. Just saying. Realizing a little too late, Marinette rushes back only to find the ring where Cat Noir left it. And here in this next scene, we are treated to some more gaslighting. Hooray!
Cat Noir doesn't want to have time off, Ladybug. He's in love with you.
Let me get this straight. The show would rather have us believe that Cat Noir is actually just in love with Ladybug. And that's the issue. When in fact, anybody who's been watching up until this point knows exactly what the real problem is. A complete lack of communication. A problem that began in Season 2. Ladybug didn't inform her partner about Master Fu, which led him to getting hurt and frustrated and almost abandoning his position as Cat Noir. And here we are back at the same place. But what hurts the most is that this could have been a phenomenal moment. Plague could have told Ladybug more about his holder. In this exact scene, she thought he would have been grateful for more time off. But what she doesn't know is that this is the highlight of his day. He loves being a superhero, and his home life sucks. Why on earth would he want a vacation being stuck at home? I never really thought about it until this episode, until the writing of this script for this particular video. Cat Noir and Ladybug barely know anything about each other, and this would have been a prime opportunity for Marinette to get more insight into her partner's home life. She doesn't know his home life is terrible, but if she did, she'd be far more understanding, and even a bit more apologetic at the fact that she's been alienating the one person she should have been getting closer to. They had the entirety of this season to really explore that, but they just didn't. Instead of Adrien learning more about Marinette as Ladybug, they instead chose Alia, and we all know why.
Cat Noir might discover my secret identity!
But I'll talk about that specific plot point later on in the video. But for right now, we need to cover the rest of the episode, and it's really weird. In this episode, Adrien tries to change his superhero persona. Okay, so what's so strange about that? Well, what's weird and somewhat disturbing is that he tries to change so Ladybug will like him more. He essentially just reverts back to his normal self. You know, the facade that he puts on in his normal day life. The masks that he wears on a daily basis that Marinette is head over heels for. The absolute fake Adrien. The real Adrien at this point is Cat Noir. What's disturbing about this new persona that he puts on in this episode is that Ladybug / Marinette falls head over heels for him. Because of course she does. She would rather be in love with an absolute fake, the people pleaser, and not the real Adrien. I'm very confused because I thought the writers would want us to fall in love with the relationship between Ladybug and Cat Noir, between Adrien and Marinette. But the way things are going, I and many other fans are starting to turn away from that idea. They are actively pushing us away from something that should be the endgame relationship. Anyways, Ladybug is klutz because that's part of her character at this point, and can't really do her job properly with Adrien's new persona. And so Adrien ultimately decides to return to his usual self by the end of the episode. All the while I'm starting to hate Marinette for falling in love with an absolute faker. The writing needs to be significantly better from here on out, and I think all of you know the drill. As a matter of fact, in this next season, even the most diehard fans finally understood how mistreated Adrien is. This next season would be the finale to the Gabriel Agreste arc, so naturally you would think Adrien would be a focal point, right?
The nightmare's still here!
Okay, I should probably hurry things along so my editor doesn't die in the dungeon that I've kept him in. We've finally made it to Season 5. And all things considered, it's not that bad. We pick up right after Hawkmoth, for the first time in history, is able to achieve victory over our heroes. To just make a long story short, he's able to get all the Miraculous during the finale of Season 4. This leaves Ladybug alone and depressed. Cat Noir shows up, and we get one of my favorite scenes.
I've lost all the Miraculous. I'm the worst guardian ever. I wanted to control everything. I didn't listen to you. I lied to you. I kept you at a distance.
She's actually admitting to her mistakes and owning up to them? This is fantastic! There's no way they could ruin this!
You, the best superhero there ever was!
Well, that was short-lived. We're not going to talk about this. We're not going to sit down and discuss the problems we've had since Season 2. He's just going to forgive her. That's it. Why? Okay, I understand this isn't exactly the right moment to have a conversation, but at least have them talk about it later. Ugh, because he's so forgiving, she can't own up to her own mistakes. We can't have a quiet moment between the two of them and have Ladybug genuinely say, I'm sorry. And for Cat Noir to say, we'll figure it out. All this would do is develop our characters, but the way Thomas is running the show, we can't have development of any kind. And listen to the characters in the background during this scene.
Ladybug! Ladybug!
They're only cheering for Ladybug. Thanks, great guys. Don't cheer for Cat Noir. He's standing right there next to her, and he's been there for you all the entire time. But I did mention that things would get better for Adrian, so let me get to the good parts. Naturally, Gabriel decides to use the rabbit Miraculous first. As a result of this, Bunnix from the future shows up to help our young heroes stop him from interrupting the timeline. As they fight in the burrow, Alex is paralyzed, leaving Ladybug to take the... Oh, wow! She gives it to Cat Noir! He actually gets to do something! Thomas must have stepped out for some coffee or something. And he actually looks pretty cool. I failed to mention this up until now, but the few times Adrian has taken on a new form with the Miraculous, specifically the snake, he's looked but ugly. Marinette at least has looked halfway decent with her other transformations. Adrian, however, was never afforded such luck. But I guess this time around they wanted to sell some Rabbit Noir toys. Adrian is complete natural with the new power, which is super refreshing. They're able to chase Hawkmoth through time and stop him from achieving his goal. This is easier said than done, seeing as though he has most of the Miraculous. As the fight progresses, they find themselves in a wartime Paris, needing to enlist the help of their former master. While not believing them at first, who does eventually relent and gives them the dog Miraculous. They then come back to present day and find Alex and give her said Miraculous. As a side note, I love Alex's reaction. She's somewhat offended and even appalled that she got the dog instead of the rabbit. And honestly, it's nice. We've had plenty of moments with the other characters becoming heroes for the most part. However, Alex was the only one who was left out, and now she has her moment to shine. The three heroes set out and are able to achieve a small victory and take away the rabbit Miraculous from Hawkmoth. And now, he is no longer able to travel through time. Our heroes try to set a trap for him in the following episode, ultimately leading Hawkmoth/Gabriel on a wild goose chase, and finally Cat Noir and Ladybug are able to corner him. In order to escape, he lets himself be hit by his son's cataclysm. And this, ladies and gentlemen, is when the story of Miraculous slowly starts to pivot for the first time towards Adrian. If only just a little. See, when Adrian's cataclysms hit someone, I imagine they would kill any normal person instantly. But when used on a superpowered individual like his father, while it doesn't kill him instantly, it slowly but surely will over time. This ultimately puts Gabriel on a clock, and the bells will eventually toll at the end of the season finale. So, what this essentially does for Adrian is give him more screen time, as his father tries to slowly get closer to him during season 5. During this time, Adrian finds himself developing feelings for Marinette as well, soon leading them into an actual relationship. However, unbeknownst to Adrian, his father does not approve. Gabriel has actually planned for his son to end up with Kagami, so this naturally means Adrian must stop pursuing Marinette. As tensions rise between father and son, Adrian ultimately decides to stay with Marinette and disobey his father. And it's here that we get a soft confirmation that Adrian is a senti monster. This theory first started blossoming when the Peacock Miraculous first started getting more fleshed out. As Natalie began to use it, viewers started to notice its capabilities, and began to wonder why Adrian's mother Emily ever needed to use the Miraculous in the first place. One theory is that in the beginning, people started to question if Emily was a good person. Maybe she was evil and worse than Gabriel. But once the Peacock was first used, fans realized what it could do, and perhaps Emily had used it for other reasons. Maybe she and Gabriel couldn't conceive a child, and so Emily resorted to use the Miraculous. This would ultimately be answered as Season 5 continued onward, giving us small hints here and there that this theory was indeed true. And me? Well, I'm convinced Thomas stole it. This is solely the best plot point in the show. It's a great twist, and that's why I believe Thomas didn't actually write it. This is the same person who decided to barely cover the lore, and we're already over 100 episodes in. The same writer who decided to have Marinette the center of the universe, and completely block out his supposed secondary main character. If you don't believe me, think back to the first season, when Gabriel is speaking to Marinette.
Isn't he flawless? Adrian, my son, he's the image of perfection, don't you think?
Now, most fans will say this is a prime example of the story telling us that Adrian is in fact a senti monster. But bear in mind that this example is pretty vague. Gabriel's talking about his son being perfect, which could lead you to believe that in fact he's talking about his son not being a natural human. However, Gabriel's pretty elitist. He's raised his son to be perfect, and didn't want him to interact with other kids at school because he viewed them as common folk. and his son is among the elite.
He'll feel better by then. He's an egressed.
So this isn't necessarily concrete proof that Adrian is a senti-monster. To follow up, I'm going to mention Miraculous, in which Adrian gets hit with his own cataclysm. Now, I shouldn't have to remind you, but I will. The show very clearly establishes that if a senti-monster is hit with this ability, they'll just go berserk. Yet in this episode, Adrian is fine. He's injured, but he never goes out of control. I would have thought that Thomas would have taken this moment to foreshadow that Adrian is in fact a senti-monster. But Adrian never loses control of himself. And so I have to believe that even then, this theory wasn't even considered by Thomas. Getting back to Adrian and his father, you would think that the show would have set up a reveal for our protagonist, showing him the truth and ultimately figuring out how this is going to affect him moving forward. Which brings us to episode 24 of season 5, called Representation. Felix comes back and lures Marinette out of the end of the year school party that they were having at the Eiffel Tower and leads her back to the school. When she arrives, Felix creates a monster to help him and Kagami put on a performance that describes both his and Adrian's backstories as senti-monsters. And I have a few problems with this. Now, to be fair, this is a unique way of telling the story, but I would have preferred if the show had used its regular animation, or possibly even a 2D art style. As it is told, it's rather clunky and I feel not nearly as impactful as it would be if it was told from the perspective of, let's say, Gabriel. I think this flashback would have been cool if it were told through Gabriel's perspective, or heck, I'd even take Natalie's. This would give us a chance to see Emily and things as they were before Adrian or Marinette were even born. And my other problem, what was it again? Oh yeah, Adrian isn't here! Nope, it's just Marinette hearing all of this. I would think that the titular character of Adrian would have been here for his own damn backstory. But no. This is a story about a normal girl with a normal life called Marinette. It has nothing whatsoever to do with the boy who is far from normal and far more interesting. I distinctly remember that in most tales told, the backstory and secrets of certain characters were told to the appropriate characters. In Harry Potter, I would think that Harry Potter was told the backstory of his family and not Neville Longbottom. Well, at least Adrian is able to fly solo and help defeat the enemy. Oh, never mind, he gets help from his classmates because he can't do anything on his own. God forbid we have him get an achievement. Well, at least he gets to have a confrontation with his father. Kind of take this all in. This is the best we're gonna get. Oh yeah, it goes downhill real fast. How much worse can this get? At the rate we're going, Adrian isn't even going to be present for the season finale. Why are you giving me that look? He has to be present for the finale of his father's arc. He's been fighting him since the beginning of the story, and you can't have his father's arc without him? They have to fight. He's got to realize that his dad's Hawkmoth. No. No. No! Here we are at the finale. And if you thought this was Thomas's chance to repair at least a little bit of damage he's done to Adrian's character, go and fuck yourself, because Adrian is nowhere to be found during this finale. And that's saying something, because almost every other character has something to do, but the secondary main protagonist? What secondary main protagonist? We only have Marinette. This is Miraculous Ladybug, and Cat Noir, he's not a part of it. I would have thought that Adrian/Cat Noir would have been here for the final fight with Hawkmoth, aka his father.
I wouldn't believe it if I saw it. I saw it and I don't believe it.
What an absolute wasted opportunity. This would have done nothing more than add to the drama, the stakes, the emotion, the betrayal. This finale with Adrian practically writes itself. Hey, Thomas, have you seen Star Wars? It's this small movie trilogy that happened back in the 70s and 80s. In it, the main character Luke Skywalker fights his father Darth Vader throughout the trilogy, and during the finale of the last movie, they have their final confrontation. Or was any of this during the finale to Gabriel's arc? It's as if Thomas forgot all about Gabriel being Adrian's father. If anybody had taken a back seat, it should have been Marinette. She had no business taking over Adrian's story. This was his story, but Thomas wanted his daughter to be front and center. I didn't stutter with that last part either. Why does any of this matter? Why am I getting so angry? I'm sure a ton of you are typing that I'm a sexist, that I don't like strong female leads in cartoons or something of that nature, which simply is not true. It shouldn't have been this way. Adrian was supposed to be a main character. Not the main character, a main character. But instead, he is the trophy to the main female lead. His own story? That doesn't matter. This is Miraculous Ladybug, and she's the only one that matters. But as a result of this, it ruined the finale. And thankfully, a majority of the fans finally took notice for once. It was so bad that all the fanatics who were still defending the show actually looked at the finale and collectively said, "What the fuck?" To them, this is Marinette's show, and Adrian had a few moments here and there, but still, he was bound to get his moment at the climax of the season 5 finale. So you can imagine everyone's surprise when this wasn't the case. And that's why I brought up the problem with the title at the start of the chapter of the video. If this was truly Miraculous, Tales of Ladybug and Cat Noir, you would have seen a decent amount of scenes focused on Adrian and his character, but they're fewer and far between. This is why a lot of fans call the show Miraculous Ladybug, because half the time you can't be bothered to remember that Adrian/Cat Noir is a secondary main lead in a show that has his name in the title itself. The truth is, Adrian is nothing more than a prize for our heroine to get at the end of the season. She doesn't even tell them the truth about him being a senti monster, or even the fact that his father was Hawkmoth. Maybe if their gender roles were reversed, more people would have noticed. There are countless females in media that are shelved to push forward the male protagonist, and there are plenty of people pointing it out. But in Miraculous, most people don't notice because Adrian is a guy.
What about my side of the story? Fuck your side of the story! You have a dick and balls! We don't want to hear it!
And fans are too busy yelling at Marinette, saying things like, "You go girl," and "Yes, queen!" The truth is that no character should be dismissed and disregarded just to elevate another one. It happens all the time. And if anyone thinks I'm blaming Marinette, I'm not. You should never really blame the character in these instances. You should always blame the writer. The writer is responsible for their story, their heroes, and their villains. Speaking of which... Alright, I think I've talked enough about Adrian. I should start talking about his father, Gabriel Agreste. Candidate for possibly being one of the worst villains in a television series in the past 10 years. However, it wasn't always like that. When the series first began, Hawkmoth was still a decent villain. He had a fair amount of mystique, and sure, he's cheesy, but this is a cartoon, so it's easy to forgive. Once we move past the pilot into the second episode, things get a bit more interesting. This would be the first time we would meet Adrian's father, Gabriel. He was cold, stern, cruel even. He's totally the villain, isn't he? And might I add that it doesn't help that both Hawkmoth and Gabriel are both voiced by Keith Silverstein in the English version. So most teenagers and young adults picked up on the fact that he was indeed the main villain. But we didn't exactly have concrete proof. The only time they seemed to hint this was in the episode Simon Says. In it, Gabriel becomes the target, one of Hawkmoth's victims, which leads us to this scene.
Gabriel, I'm coming to get you!
It's risky, but it's given me an idea.
It's risky. Why would it be risky for you? Unless you and Gabriel are in fact one and the same. And that would be all we were given until the premiere of the second season. It's here that we were given solid confirmation that this was indeed the case, as Gabriel is able to akumatize himself and turn himself into the Collector. And so the story of Miraculous started to expand. Its villain was being fleshed out, and his motivations would slowly be revealed to the audience. So, what's the problem then? Well...
We will find the silver crystal at any cost.
This is Queen Beryl. She is the first main antagonist of Sailor Moon. Her goals were simple: collect enough energy to revive Metalia and take over the Earth. Her story lasted for all of one season, a grand total of 46 episodes. Now, how many episodes does Gabriel have as an antagonist for Miraculous? 131. Houston, we have a problem. If you leave the same villain in your story for any extended period of time, it gets very dull. For 131 episodes, we're just doing the same thing over and over, and over, and over. And over again. Somebody gets akumatized. They cause havoc in the city of Paris. Ladybug and Cat Noir defeat them and take the Akuma. Miraculous Ladybug, and rinse and repeat the cycle after every episode. But wait, didn't you just use Sailor Moon as an example? But in Sailor Moon, they reuse the same formula over and over. It's the Monster of the Week, just like Miraculous. Yes, Sailor Moon did have the Monster of the Week formula. As such, a lot of episodes can get repetitive. However, to say that Sailor Moon was just a Monster of the Week show, just like Miraculous, is to ignore the plot points that were usually going on in that anime. In Season 1 of Sailor Moon, Usagi and Luna are trying to find the other Guardians, as well as the Moon Princess. In Season 2, Usagi's daughter from the future shows up, and the Guardians need to try and stop the apocalyptic future. Other things were going on in Sailor Moon, not to mention it's from the 90s. So, by comparison, what's going on in Miraculous? Let me break it down. Gabriel starts out the series by taking control of someone hurt and distraught, and has them trying to take the Miraculous from Ladybug and Cat Noir. And we end season 5 with him doing that exact same thing. Nothing changes. He barely evolves as a character, and keeping him around this long just makes him, as well as our heroes, look downright incompetent. Out of the 131 episodes, he wins only 2 times. Do the math, he's lost the other 129. Instead of planning things out, Gabriel would rather use Mr. Pigeon.
What? Mr. Pigeon has already been akumatized 71 times?
72 times. 72 times! What on earth were you thinking, Gabriel? I could understand 2 or 3 times, sure, but you chose him 72 times. At any point, did it cross your mind that after the first couple tries, the man who controls flying rats wasn't going to work? Actually, this is yet again Thomas's fault, and not Gabriel's, so I shouldn't be too angry. Look, I get it. This is probably a gag that the writers came up with. Hey, let's have Mr. Pigeon be used 72 times. But because of this, Hawkmoth just looks like a complete idiot. The only person who was able to come up with any sort of plan was Natalie. At this point of the video, we're over an hour in, and I'm sure the comments are just flooding with how I'm a sexist, how I'm a jerk, how I am a Marinette hater, through and through. But I will gladly now take your edited comments, as I now discuss Miraculous's most neglected villain, and its second most neglected character, Natalie. At the start of the series, Natalie was nothing more than one of the ever-revolving, reoccurring cast of Miraculous. But then, the writers decided to evolve her character during season 2. The only good decision Thomas decided to keep in. Natalie was essentially changed not only to be a supporting character, but also to be a secondary antagonist. They made her even more caring towards Adrian. Now see, this is a good example of a retcon, seeing as though at the start of the series, Natalie forgot all about Adrian's birthday, something that later on she would never do. And as season 2 premiered, a certain detail was added that made fans question how much Natalie knew about Gabriel's double life. With the first episode of season 2, she was asked to put a book inside Hawkmoth's lair. Wait, does she know Gabriel as Hawkmoth? At the end of the episode, when Gabriel puts the spellbook back, she asks,
"So then, if you already had a copy of the book, why'd you go through all that trouble?"
I did what I had to do to keep my secret.
Providing more evidence that she might know more than the audience first initially thought. Which brings us to the end of season 2, the 2-parter finale, Heroes Day. It's here that Hawkmoth enacts his latest scheme, and Natalie is at the center of it. And she's revealed to be a willing participant and knows Gabriel's true identity. She is turned into a villain catalyst and enables Hawkmoth's abilities to go beyond their normal limits. This essentially allows him to make as many Akumas as he wants. But as we previously discussed, Gabriel loses and is about to be captured and his identity revealed when Natalie decides to don the Peacock Miraculous. Now, not only do we have more heroes, but we have one more villain. So theoretically, this should add more stakes and expand the story of the series, but it doesn't. Now instead, for some reason, they decide not to use Natalie. But Green Line, they can't use Natalie because the Peacock is broken. She gets sick every time she uses it. I understand that it's the show's in-lore excuse, but couldn't Thomas and his writers work their way around this? They could have just as easily written an extra ability that they got from the spellbook that allowed her to heal for a short time. Or if that's too convoluted, we could just simply say that it negates the effects for a short period of time and call it a day. Or, I don't know, just have Natalie tough it out. Remember, supposedly Emily had used this Miraculous twice, and it didn't negatively affect her too much until 15 years later. So why was Natalie so badly affected so soon after using it? This really sucks because with episodes like Party Crasher, we could have had an opportunity to see more of Natalie. The show could have given us Natalie taking on the role as Hawkmoth for an episode because Gabriel needed to leave town. But of course he doesn't, because he needs to stay in town and take control of someone for an afternoon. I know I gave a lot of flack to Marinette for giving Alia the Miraculous, but I thought it would have been cool to see Natalie use the butterfly, at least once. Thomas had the chance to give us another interesting villain to support Gabriel, now that there were more heroes. But he completely wasted Natalie/Mayura. What makes this worse is Gabriel is just able to fix the Miraculous and use it for himself. This doesn't help Natalie's condition whatsoever. Instead, she's just sidelined in favor of the ultra-boring Shadow Moth. And yeah, that's his new name now, but nobody cares. Despite having 2 powers now, he's still somehow incompetent. As mentioned earlier, Gabriel can't be bothered to figure out who Ladybug and Cat Noir really are, despite the latter being his son. Yeah, come to think of it, Adrian has transformed so many times in his own room. How did Gabriel not notice anything? They have cameras in the house, so how come nobody noticed Adrian transformed like 70 times? And yet they expect me to believe that in this alternate timeline, Gabriel is able to pick up on the fact that his son is a superhero just by saying, "Oh, m'lady." Plot hole? What plot hole? I don't see any plot hole. Well, at least they made Gabriel somewhat sympathetic in season 2. Sure, he never found out his son was Cat Noir, but at least he cared, right? This is a good step in the right direction so long as they don't fuck it up. It should be fine.
Cat Noir? My own son? The Miraculous will soon be mine!
Well, that didn't take too long. Thomas, Gabriel was supposed to be sympathetic, right?
Yes, exactly.
Oh, really? Because that's not what's being shown on screen. In the show, you tried to make a sympathetic villain, but somehow ended up making a monster by accident. How? Alright, I need to keep moving along. So, at the end of season 4, Felix tricks Marinette and is able to obtain her yo-yo and essentially give Gabriel all the other Miraculous, except for the Ladybug and Cat, obviously, in exchange for the Peacock. And so, in Season 5, Gabriel has all the Miraculous he'll need to take down the last two heroes, especially with the bunny in his possession. With it, he can take down Cat Noir and Ladybug.
You could go back to a time before Emily used the damaged Peacock Miraculous. You can save your wife, Gabriel.
Actually, let's do Natalie's plan. I know I should have brought this up earlier, but honestly I think Natalie's the one coming up with all the good plans. The Scarlet Moth plan? I think that was Natalie. Think about it for a second. Gabriel would rather use a baby to do his battles. Anyways, Gabriel uses the bunny and... Gabriel, do you know how time travel works? Victory was right there in front of you and you didn't take it! You were going back to a point where the two of them didn't even exist yet! I get it. If he did that, then he would have won, and we can't have that. There wouldn't be any show. But was there really no other way to go about that? Maybe young Alex from a short time in the future, right after she gets her Bunny Miraculous, shows up to stop him. Or maybe even another holder of the Bunny Miraculous shows up. One we've never met before, one from the past, and stops him. There, I came up with 2 solutions to this problem in a little over a minute. And your writing team couldn't come up with anything good in a matter of weeks? Are you kidding me? So he loses the bunny. And you know the rest. The Ladybug and Cat try to set a trap for him, but he escapes, but gets hit by a cataclysm by his son. And as if things couldn't get any worse for Gabriel, Thomas and his writers decide to humiliate their main villain. Let me talk about the midpoint of Season 5, Episodes 10 and 11, titled Kwame's Choice. This marks a rare moment in the series as both protagonists just are tired of being superheroes and so they quit and relinquish their abilities. As a result, Ollie and Zoe take over the roles as Scar, Bella, and Kitty Noir. Not to be confused with Cat Noir's nickname that was given to him by Bunnix. And then Gabriel gets another win and is able to take the Ladybug and Cat Miraculous. This is due to Gabriel having his own MacGuffin in Season 5 in the form of the Alliance Rings. I didn't want to get into them too much because this video is long enough. They just gather data from users and allow Gabriel to track people who wear them, and he's also able to use them to transfer the abilities from the Miraculous once they are akumatized. Oh, but of course, Marinette and Adrian don't wear the rings. Everybody else does though, like literally everybody else, except our 2 heroes. Because plot. How does this get worse for Gabriel? Well, after obtaining the 2 Miraculous that he needs to make the wish, Tiki and Plague just managed to fend him off after a few moments. Which is interesting because they don't do this later in the season, which, yeah, I'll get into in a moment. Plague ends up destroying his ring, severing his connection to the world. But if Hawkmoth was able to get the Lucky Charm, then he could use the Ladybug's abilities and restore the ring. But it's important to note here that he is all miraculous. Nothing can stop him now. So, naturally he has to fight children, he is defeated, and has to crawl back to Natalie so she can come up with a better plan, because his was terrible.
What is wrong with you?
Let me repeat myself. Gabriel had at his disposal almost every Miraculous, and barely used any of them. As a result, he was defeated by an unpowered Ladybug and Cat Noir, including their friends. Somehow the main villain went from being a joke to being an absolute embarrassment. How am I supposed to take your villain seriously if I know he can be beaten by teenagers with no abilities? Whatever, it's not like Gabriel was going to win in the end anyways. After all, we all know how this was going to end. Ladybug was going to defeat Hawkmoth at the end of the season. He was never going to win, and we all knew it. Wait, what? He wins. Gabriel is able to gain Marinette's sympathy, something that would have been more understandable if it was Adrian, but okay. And she's tricked into giving him the miraculous and makes his wish. Wow, consider my expectations averted. I would have thought Tiki and Plague would have resisted like they did earlier, but you know, they can't because plot. So Gabriel ends up sacrificing himself to bring back his wife. Or maybe not, maybe he just sacrifices himself to bring back Natalie. But then again, he had no life to give, so I don't know how this quite works out. So, and now Gabriel's reputation is tarnished and he's revealed to be the villain, and this will follow Adrian for the next few seasons.
A statue in honor of the great Gabriel Agreste.
Oh wait, never mind. Thomas had one last fuck you. So, let me understand this. The teenage girl who was a brat and who was rude, but also was emotionally abused and could have been redeemed, is the absolute worst and irredeemable. But the grown-ass man who mentally abused his son and used him gets redeemed, and his legacy is being a martyr. As you can imagine, this kind of pissed off the fan base. And myself. The man who has threatened the people of Paris, including children, even his own, gets to walk off scot-free. Meanwhile, Chloe, who probably needs therapy due to her neglectful and abusive parents, gets thrown aside and removed from the show and gets replaced by her bland and boring half-sister, whose only redeeming quality in the show was probably her confession to Marinette. What hurts the most is at some point Gabriel could have been sympathetic, but the longer the show went on, they somehow turned him into a complete monster, but then have the gall to turn around and tell you no, he's actually sympathetic. Where does this leave us? With Gabriel out of the picture, that means Lila will be the next villain, right? It was teased in the episode Time Tagger that she'll probably be the next villain. Hey, remember when I brought up a certain revelation that I discovered? The only other major issue I have is, well, you know what? I'll talk about that later. Alright, Green Line, what's this revelation you've come to? Why is it so horrifying? Upon my second rewatch of the episode Time Tagger, when future Alex was going over enemies and the future, I realized something. Something I wish I hadn't. While the person behind the persona had changed, nothing else had. We were still dealing with Hawkmoth. Those monsters? Yeah, probably somebody late for work and got fired. Those evil twins who were super scary? Those are Ollie's little sisters. Nothing has changed. Why should I be excited for the next few seasons when all they're going to do is rehash the same formula that we've had for over 100 episodes? Add on to the fact that Marinette gives everybody a Miraculous. She's just formed her own Avengers team. How is Lila going to be any threat to them? This is going to be an absolute cakewalk for them. I don't think Thomas thought about that ahead of time. So, if the show really isn't that deep, and the villain's a complete joke, how is the show held up for over 100 episodes?
Entwined for eternity.
Oh.
Why haven't we been molded together in the plaster of destiny?
Just already!
I think it may come as a surprise to anyone on the outside looking in, but to any Miraculous fan watching this video, you're not in the least bit surprised that the show has survived this long, because a large contribution to its survival is a tale as old as time. Will they, or won't they? Now, this has the potential to be something fun, so long as it doesn't overstay its welcome. So of course, once the creators realized that it was the most popular thing in the fan base, they stretched it out as long as fucking possible. And for most shows to stretch out a romantic subplot this long might seem completely unfeasible, until you realize how Miraculous did it. Look, to sum it up as quickly as I can, Marinette likes Adrian, but she's not the biggest fan of Cat Noir. And Cat Noir likes Ladybug, but Adrian's kind of oblivious when it comes to Marinette's feelings about him. And so if you're paying attention to the video, or if you're familiar with the series, then you know that the two of them like each other. They just don't know it, because the other one likes the other's secret identity. And there's the catch, they don't know each other's secret identities. This leads us into the freaking love square. Alright, I've been holding on to this for quite a while. This right here isn't a square. I think Miraculous is a prime example of shipping at its worst. And that's saying something coming from me. I have an entire video defending shipping. This fan base took two people with 2 points of intersection and somehow made 4. But Green Line, Ladybug and Cat Noir are 2 separate people. They're different from Adrian and Marinette. No, they're not. Maybe in the beginning there might have been some inkling that maybe their superhero personas were different entities altogether, but as the series progressed, I say with full confidence that they're not. Let me remind you again that being superheroes is a job for these two, and as such, I would imagine that most of you know that people can act differently in work versus outside of work. Have any of you heard of the phrase, a hat for every occasion? It basically means you act differently depending on which environment you are in. You might act nicer around your family than you are with your friends. Adrian and Marinette are simply putting on hats for separate occasions.
You're a monster!
Okay, look, I know it's some fans just having fun, but it's needlessly complicated.
Master, Tiki and Flag have been captured and Cat Noir might discover my secret identity!
What made this romantic subplot stand out is also the thing that completely ruined it. The reveal of their secret identities. If you ask any fan of this show and ask them what kept them watching, most of them would probably come to the conclusion that they wanted to see Marinette and Adrian end up together. And so, by extension, their secret identities would have to be revealed to one another. And so, at some point, the creators came to this conclusion as well. And so they kept stretching it, and stretching it, and stretching. And a lot of romantic comedies tend to do this as well. So that alone isn't the big deal. It's only until they started retconning everything, and changing the rules.
Nobody must know who we really are, not even us.
That was the chance to find out who the love of your life really is!
This is Plague, telling Adrian it's totally fine to know the secret identity of Ladybug.
You shouldn't be trying to find out more. If you discovered Ladybug's true identity, you'd have to give your Miraculous back!
And this is Plague telling Adrian that it's not okay to know the secret identity of Ladybug. Now, at first glance, you might think that there was some sort of conversation between Plague and Tiki discussing that it's important to keep their identity secret between episodes. There wasn't. The show just brings this up and prays that you didn't pay attention. The show just changed the rules so Marinette and Adrian could keep their secret identities. But as the show continued to go on, it became more and more awkward that they didn't know each other's identities. There's even instances where the two of them not knowing this information actively hindered them as superheroes.
Felix!
He has the yo-yo!
Maybe, if you knew who Cat Noir was, this wouldn't have happened. You know, this is all kind of funny when you remember that the two of them had their identities revealed on 3 separate occasions. Here,
Flag, close out!
Here, and here.
See?
But then of course they just decided to say that it was an alternate timeline. Or in one episode's case, it's just a memory wipe. So the creators just gave you a taste right before taking it away. And it's strange, because if they wanted a way out, they had one lying on the table, and they just didn't use it. Master Fu is ultimately the one who came up with the rule to keep their identities a secret. Here's what Thomas and his writers could have done. The Master is all for the two of them knowing each other's identities. It would make sense to make their jobs easier as they could contact one another in case there was an attack. However, the Master finds out that the two of them are in love with each other. Specifically, their alter egos, as we've discussed. And it's here where he makes the tough decision not to tell them and implements the rule. Because we discover later that he was in love with Marion, and it made their job harder in Paris as superheroes. As a result, he didn't want Marinette and Adrian to suffer the same problem. What they do in the show proper, though, is just make him look like an ass. But what I've done here is actually make him care about his students. He understands that they love each other, but also knows that this is going to be very tough for them and could lead to difficulties down the road. Add on to the fact with dialogue, you could imply that this wasn't an easy decision for him to make, but it would take time. You would need to flesh out backstory and add more dialogue. But even if this had worked to justify no reveal, the overall relationship between Adrian and Marinette would have been an uphill battle. In most long-running media, the classic will they won't they can be a fun way to keep your viewers entertained. However, if you're not careful, you can run into a big problem. If you take too much time in dragging it out, then the relationship between your two characters who are at odds with one another start to look less like people who secretly care about one another and just won't show it, and more like people who hate each other's guts. And in Marinette's case, your fun, quirky, and shy girl turns into a creep and a stalker due to flanderization. This is ultimately what happened between Marinette and Adrian. By the end of season 5, I started to question whether it was appropriate for the two of them to be together. Adrian isn't really himself around her, and Marinette is keeping secrets from Adrian about his life and his father. In all honesty, the two of them should have revealed their secret identities a lot sooner, and had a quiet moment to talk. Just for once to communicate with one another about their true feelings, and for the show itself to slow down. Then again, the show in particular has a really tough time doing that specific thing.
I'm lost.
When I think back on some of my favorite shows, I think of moments like Starfire and Raven trying to get to know each other so that they can take down the Puppy King and save their friends. I think of moments like Iroh trying to convince Zuko to look inward and find the value in himself outside of his homeland. And I remember the moment where the Sailor Scouts gave up their lives so that Usagi could push forward. A lot of these moments aren't action-filled. They're very quiet to explore these characters and develop them. So why doesn't Miraculous do this more often? Why is it so hard to find any moments like this in this show? Okay, there are a few moments, like the moment between Marinette and Chloe, well, until Chloe was thrown out with the trash, and there's even a moment between Felix and Kagami in the later parts of season 5. But in total, there's not that many. As I spoke of in the Adrian section of this video, I mentioned that if they had any time to talk, that it would have helped solve the problem with Adrian's character. If he and Ladybug had spoken about his feelings and being left out and being discarded, despite him being her partner. But it doesn't just apply to our two main heroes. What happened when Alia became a superhero? How did she feel? How did this affect her when writing for the Lady Block? We the audience don't get any insight into her character hardly at all. And if it just applied to the characters, we would be done. But sadly, it also applies to the story as a whole. Our two heroes over the course of 100 episodes don't try to figure out who their opponent is. Outside of the Season 2 premiere, Ladybug or Cat Noir don't try to figure out who Hawkmoth is. This is the man who threatens Paris on a daily basis, but our protagonists don't try to discover his secret identity, despite the fact that if they did, they would have a lot more free time on their hands and their city would be safer. And if you think it's bad for Hawkmoth, it's even worse for Mayura. Outside of one passing mention from Cat Noir and Ladybug, you almost forgot that Natalie is the secondary antagonist. The show proper doesn't seem to acknowledge Mayura at all. Why do I think that? Because after her first appearance, what changed? Nothing. You would think that Adrian and Marinette would have brought up Mayura to the Master, or talked amongst themselves as Ladybug and Cat Noir. It should have been a bigger deal that they had a second villain, and it should have shifted the story from that point on, but nobody could be bothered to give her the time of day. Remember the episode Reflect All? The entire episode could have been the basis for exploring our two leads. When they switched powers at the end of the episode, they could have decided to keep the change for a little while longer. This would have opened the door for Adrian to get to know Tiki, and maybe get to know a little bit about Ladybug's daily life when she's not a superhero. While at the same time, Marinette could have gotten to know Plague just a little bit more and learned about Adrian's terrible home life, which could have been used later on in season 4. But this amazing concept is nothing more than a simple idea for a singular episode. Or what about Feast? At the end of the episode, the Temple of the Guardians comes back, and as a result, it should have shifted the status quo of the story moving forward. But nothing comes of it other than Suhon, who is just a worse version of Master Fu. I would have thought Adrian and Marinette would have learned about the Guardians and their role in the world, but the show would rather keep to the status quo. It could go in depth on its lore, but it doesn't. Oh, you forgot the show has lore? That's right, all the way back in season 1, we discovered that there had been Ladybugs and Cat Noirs for centuries. So, when does the show bring up the previous holders in any meaningful capacity? Well, the first time we got was in episode 3, and the episode explaining that there had been a Ladybug a long time ago in the times of the pharaohs in ancient Egypt. So, naturally, we would expect some follow-up to the overall lore and mythos of the show. So, when is the next time that we'll get to hear about the previous incarnations of Ladybug and Cat Noir? Oh, 108 episodes later? Who needs to focus on lore and backstory when you could just watch a teenage girl make a fool of herself every other episode? Let me ask you something. What do we know about Adrian's mother, Emily? Next to nothing. It wasn't until season 5 that we were given any breadcrumbs in regards to the character whatsoever. The writers had to cram her backstory in a singular episode instead of giving us flashbacks from the perspective of Adrian and Gabriel, where we could have learned even more. Because instead of focusing on world building and exploring its characters, this show would rather focus on the dumb romance. But I suppose that's not really fair, because even when it came to the romance, the story fell pretty flat. Now, I'm sure I have a few Miraculous fans screaming at me and wondering why I didn't mention Luca or Kagami. When talking about the love square portion in this video, I failed to mention the new love interests for Marinette and Adrian. I kinda just swept them under the rug. But in my defense, so did the show. Starting in Season 2, both Luca and Kagami are introduced as possible new love interests for our two heroes. And throughout the next couple seasons, the show would slowly develop the new relationships to shake up the story and foundations. Finally, this would all pay off in the Season 3 finale, when seemingly Marinette and Luca end up together, as well as Adrian and Kagami are presumably going out. And then in the Season 4 premiere, they immediately break up. Not a single thought was given to how these relationships would evolve our characters. Perhaps over the course of the season, Marinette and Adrian would have learned that maybe they're just better off with each other than in their current relationships. But everything in the story proper seems to indicate that we would rather focus on the monster of the week and the romance of our two main leads than focus on anything else. There's simply no room to talk about anything. But before I close out this video, I should talk about the one criticism that's probably flooding my comment section. The one defense against criticisms with shows like Miraculous. If you scroll down to the comment section, I'm sure you'll find quite a few comments saying the same thing. Dude, it's a kid's show. You're just being overly critical. And my personal favorite, look at this grown man complaining for 2 hours. It's just a kid's show. Yes it is. And shouldn't kids get good quality entertainment? Bear in mind, a lot of examples I used in comparison to Miraculous were kid shows. Batman the Animated Series was created in the 90s. It dealt with things like the pain of loss, redemption, and perseverance. Teen Titans was created in the early 2000s, and it dealt with things like self-acceptance and even racism, with far better grace and tact than any other series in modern day if you ask me. Do you know why people still talk about Avatar: The Last Airbender? It's because it's well written, with great world building and amazing characters. And don't forget, Sailor Moon is also a kid show. Most people won't think about that because it's an anime, but remember, Sailor Moon did air on television for kids. These are all kid shows, so Miraculous has no excuse. Let me be blunt. Thomas Astruck is just a hack. I don't use that term lightly. In fact, when I looked it up the definition, he just fit the bill perfectly. A hack is a writer who produces dull and uninspired work just for the sake of money and profit. The series constantly repeats itself, and I find that pretty dull. Thomas just copied the likes of Spider-Man and Sailor Moon, so I consider that somewhat uninspired. Money and profit? Doesn't every creator want money and profit from their show? Yeah, but look at how Miraculous is marketed with its story unfolding as it is. There's multiple specials acting as pilots for multiple spin-off series. And look at the latest special, it's trying to introduce a multiverse, just like all those comic book movies. All the while, Thomas can't be bothered to explore and expand on the world building that the show introduced at the very start. But do you know what we can do? We can talk about saving the environment. While rummaging around through Twitter, we actually found that Thomas was actually an environmentalist. Now hold on, this isn't necessarily a bad thing. There's nothing wrong with wanting to protect the environment. My main complaint is that during the Season 5 finale, he made Paris a utopia with no more pollution. Okay. Add on to the fact that one of his supporting characters, Maylin, is an environmentalist, and that's pretty much her main character trait. Captain Planet wasn't this overt with its message. Miraculous at times is beating you over the head with "save the environment." Apparently no one told Thomas that there's such a thing as nuance. They didn't also tell him to change the names of his characters, like Marinette's parents. Remember when I brought up Marinette was Thomas's daughter? I wasn't kidding. So what? Thomas just based character off of his daughter. That's not a problem. No, that's not what happened. It's so much worse. Marinette's father is named Tom, and despite many years of seeing the show, I've never caught on to this fact. This is clearly a self-insert. Okay, a creator putting themselves into their work is understandable, right? But here comes the really questionable part. Tom's wife and Marinette's mother, Sabine, shares the same name with Thomas's ex-girlfriend. While developing Miraculous, Thomas was dating this woman and decided to insert her into his story as his character's wife, which is somewhat questionable, but still understandable. But it's the last part that makes it extra ewy. Marinette is the imaginary daughter of Thomas and his ex-girlfriend. His main character is a fantasy from his past relationship, or at least it appears that way. Did Jeremy Zag not suggest at the bare minimum changing the names of Marinette's mother? Look, I get it. While creating the show, he imagined a family with his current girlfriend and based the main character's family off of that. But at some point, you should have changed the names. because as it stands, it just comes across somewhat disturbing. This is why Marinette is the center of attention and the only important character in the show, because she's the fantasy he never got to live out. A lot of great kid shows come from just the simplest of ideas, but Miraculous isn't just a simple idea. It's nothing more than a fanfic. A really expensive fanfic. If you want a good example of this show, then go watch the movie. The Miraculous film, while not perfect, is far and away better than this series could ever hope to be. I still have many problems with it, but overall, it was able to make a solid foundation in little over an hour when the main series couldn't do that with over 100 episodes. It just goes to show you what you can do with competent writing. See for yourself if you like the film, or any other series that I've mentioned in this video. For those of you who still remain, I didn't make this video because this is a show I hated since day one. Because if that were the case, I wouldn't have given it the time of day. I thought Miraculous, Tales of Ladybug, and Cat Noir could have been something, but it wasn't. It was going to be an anime until it wasn't. Ladybug's design was deemed too hard to animate, so it was changed to a less flattering 3D design. Despite this, it could have had decent designs, but out of the over 100 designs that there are, I can barely pick out 5. It should have had 2 main leads with a strong supporting cast, but instead Marinette is the solitary focus of the entire series. The villain had a decent introduction, but after over 100 episodes of failing each time, he comes across as an utter failure. If this series had just one of these problems, I could forgive it, but it has all of them, and this is why you shouldn't watch Miraculous, Tales of Ladybug, and Cat Noir. Till next time, guys.